This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw!
In just a few months, the Department of Governmental Efficiency, better known as DOGE, has become one of the most talked about agencies in modern American history. Its sweeping reforms, its radical approach to cutting government waste, and of course, its controversial leader, Elon Musk, have made it a political lightning rod. Some hail it as a bold experiment to fix Washington's bloated bureaucracy, while others see it as an unconstitutional power grab that threatens the foundations of democracy. No matter where you stand, one thing is undeniable. DOGE is changing the way the federal government operates. But to understand why it was created in the first place, we need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Because this story isn't just about an agency or a billionaire tech mogul. It's about an American crisis decades in the making. By 2025, the United States national debt had surged past $36 trillion, a staggering figure that now exceeds the combined economic output of China, Germany, Japan, India, and the United Kingdom. Over the past 2 decades, the debt has not only grown in absolute terms, but has also outpaced the nation's economic growth. In 2000, the debt-to-GDP ratio stood at 55.8%, already a cause for concern among some economists. But since then, it has nearly tripled, crossing the 100% threshold in 2012 and reaching 124% by 2024. This means the U.S. now owes significantly more than it produces in an entire year. This dramatic rise in debt is the result of years of persistent deficit spending, economic downturns, and policy choices that favored short-term relief over long-term fiscal discipline. The 2008 financial crisis triggered a wave of government bailouts and stimulus spending, pushing debt levels higher. Just as deficits began to stabilize, the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 prompted another surge in federal borrowing, with trillions allocated to stimulus checks, business relief programs, and expanded unemployment benefits. At the same time, successive tax cuts, most notably in 2001, 2003, and 2017, reduced government revenue without equivalent spending reductions. The ramifications of this debt explosion are far-reaching. Excessive borrowing increases inflationary pressures and erodes confidence in the dollar as the world's reserve currency, while a heavy reliance on foreign creditors, such as China and Japan, raises geopolitical risks. Rising interest rates mean the cost of servicing the debt is growing, consuming a larger share of the federal budget and crowding out essential investments in infrastructure, education, and research. The Department of Governmental Efficiency, DOGE, was born out of desperation, not innovation. By 2025, with the national debt soaring past $36 trillion and the debt-to-GDP ratio doubling in just 2 decades, policymakers scrambled for ways to curb runaway spending. Campaign after campaign had promised fiscal responsibility, yet year after year, deficits only grew. Something had to change, and this was the new administration's attempt to fix the government's decades-old budgeting problem. In January 2025, in one of his most controversial executive orders to date, President Donald Trump signed Executive Order 14,158, officially establishing DOGE. The agency's mission was simple in theory but audacious in practice: to eliminate wasteful government spending, streamline federal operations, and make the government run more like a business. The person Trump chose to lead this unprecedented experiment? Elon Musk. The billionaire entrepreneur, known for his work with Tesla, SpaceX, and a long history of public clashes with regulatory agencies, was now America's efficiency czar. The decision sent shockwaves through Washington. Musk had no background in government administration, yet he was now tasked with overhauling the entire federal bureaucracy. The power Musk wielded was extraordinary. Unlike typical advisory bodies, DOGE wasn't just meant to suggest reforms, it had real authority. Musk and the new administration have given themselves the capability, whether constitutional or not, to dissolve federal agencies, reallocate government funds, and access classified government data. The scale of his power was unprecedented for an unelected official. Supporters of the initiative saw this as a long overdue revolution, a necessary correction for an out-of-control bureaucracy. Critics, however, feared it was a direct attack on democratic institutions, granting unchecked authority to a single individual outside of Congress's control. Within weeks of its creation, DOGE made it clear that it wasn't just for show. Musk wasted no time making radical changes, starting with the elimination of the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID.
USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out.
For decades, USAID had been responsible for distributing billions of dollars in foreign aid. Musk dismissed the agency as an inefficient bureaucracy that funneled taxpayer money into programs with little accountability. Instead, he proposed shifting the responsibility of foreign aid to private charities and large philanthropic foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
And USAID is a bowl of worms.
Mm-hmm.
There is no apple. And when there is no apple, you've just got to basically get rid of the whole thing. Went over it with him in detail, and he agreed with that we should shut it down.
The move sparked outrage, not just from lawmakers, but from international leaders who depended on U.S. aid programs. Congress had never approved USAID's dissolution, nor had it voted to reallocate the billions that were suddenly left in limbo. Yet, under DOGE's broad authority, Musk had gone forward with the cuts regardless. Next, DOGE took aim at federal employee benefits, proposing a 50% reduction in government pensions and eliminating thousands of positions deemed redundant. Musk publicly argued that federal workers are overpaid relative to the private sector, a statement that sent government unions into a frenzy. Protests erupted in Washington, with government employees staging mass walkouts in response to what they called an illegal and reckless attack on their livelihoods. Another controversial move was DOGE's decision to seize funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, (CHUD), and redirect them toward infrastructure and military spending. The problem? Congress had never approved this reallocation. The move raised immediate legal questions. Did DOGE actually have the authority to redirect congressionally allocated funds? Almost immediately, legal experts and government officials sounded the alarm. At the heart of the debate were three major concerns. First was the issue of separation of powers. Under the U.S. Constitution, Congress holds the power of the purse, meaning that it alone controls government spending. DOGE's ability to redirect funds at will was seen as a direct violation of that principle. Critics argued that if one unelected official could override congressional spending decisions, the legislative branch's authority would be effectively meaningless. Second, there was the issue of the Appointments Clause. The Constitution requires that high-ranking officials must be confirmed by the Senate before assuming positions of power. But Musk had never been confirmed. Trump had simply appointed him unilaterally. Legal scholars warned that allowing such an appointment to stand could create a dangerous precedent, where future presidents could bypass Senate oversight entirely. Finally, there was the issue of privacy violations. DOGE had been granted access to sensitive government data, including federal employee records and information about social programs. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, raised concerns that this could violate federal privacy laws, putting millions of Americans' personal information at risk. As DOGE's actions became more aggressive, so did the resistance against it. By February 2025, 15 state attorneys general had filed lawsuits against the agency, arguing that its actions were unconstitutional.
This is so utterly unlawful that the Treasury Department and other federal agencies have literally opened the door to people who have no authority to come in and have given them not just read access, but read-write access.
Some states even announced that they would refuse to comply with DOGE's mandates, setting the stage for a legal battle that could reach the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, Congress, where even some Republican lawmakers had grown uneasy about Musk's unchecked power, began drafting legislation to limit DOGE's authority or dismantle it entirely. Public opinion on DOGE was fiercely divided.
But Trump is messing with the majority on this issue as well. How? He's on the 80 side of cutting waste. Yes, but takes me to the second part of the answer. There is a thick and expanding layer of resistance to how Trump is going about his cutting, specifically how DOGE is going about this. And specifically, by DOGE, I really mean Musk, even though the administration expects you to believe he doesn't work at DOGE. A new Washington Post poll found nearly half.
To some, Musk's reforms represented a necessary correction to decades of government waste. Supporters argued that federal agencies had become bloated, inefficient, and resistant to change. If radical action wasn't taken, they feared the national debt would continue spiraling out of control. To others, DOGE was nothing short of a constitutional crisis in the making. Even those who supported government efficiency worried about the lack of oversight and accountability in Musk's sweeping changes. Could the executive branch really grant so much power to an unelected official without approval from Congress? And if DOGE's actions were allowed to stand, what would stop future presidents from consolidating even more power under similar agencies? Now, the agency faces an uncertain future. The Supreme Court is expected to weigh in on the constitutional challenges in the coming months. And if it rules against DOGE, Musk's sweeping powers could be stripped overnight. If DOGE survives the legal challenges, it could fundamentally reshape the federal government, setting a precedent for future administrations to cut bureaucracy through executive power. And if Congress acts first, DOGE could be dismantled entirely, marking the end of yet another ambitious, controversial government experiment. The Department of Governmental Efficiency is one of the most polarizing government initiatives in modern history. It forces America to confront a fundamental question. Should government be run like a business, eliminating inefficiency at all costs? Or does that violate the very principles of democratic governance? One thing is certain: DOGE has changed the debate over government efficiency, executive power, and fiscal policy. The only question is, will it be remembered as a bold reform that saved the economy, or an unconstitutional overreach that threatened democracy itself?